I saw like Ma Kali and my mom that day. I faced a lot of bullying at that school actually, to the degree that it ended with this guy chasing me around with a saw. Like it was really intense. Yeah,
What?
attacking your person based on a meme they've seen or
Yeah,
someone's roast video and they haven't seen the primary source. They haven't,
yeah.
bothered to check out anything else. Um, it hurts. This commentary was, oh my god, this bitch released a song to monetize her breakup. And I was like, you know what?
Oh no.
But what was funny was people in the comments were like, hey, so you have no problem when Taylor Swift does this, when Ariana Grande does this.
Hmm. Do you regret talking about your breakup on social media? Hi, Avanti. Welcome to Chumma Conversations.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad we could finally do this. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I'm so happy this is happening. Um, I'm really interested to know about your early years because you say that you spent half your life in two countries. You were born in the US and then you moved to India when you were 8. And usually for people it's the other way around.
Yeah.
And they have like a huge culture shock, right, when they go to the US. Did you have any culture shock moments when you moved back to India?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in Boston, but specifically suburban
Mm-hmm.
Massachusetts. And for those people who are not familiar with that life, it's you have a house, there's a front yard, backyard, neighborhood, all of that. So it's a fairly
Mm-hmm.
sheltered existence in that capacity. I would visit India every year, but just to see my grandparents. And then when I was around 8 or 9 years old, when we moved, um, I definitely had a culture shock because it's very different living in a place as opposed to visiting.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really grateful that, as you said, for a lot of people, it's kind of the reverse. They often grow up in another country and then
Mm-hmm.
move to the US or wherever. I'm super grateful that it was the reverse because I think it actually helped me connect with, my roots much in a much stronger way. Because when you're in your teenage and adolescent years, you tend to want to either conform or rebel to your circumstances.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so I'm grateful that I was in a space and place where I was able to deeply connect, right? Culturally, it helped me with music, it helped me with
Okay.
so many other things.
You mentioned that when someone's a teenager, they tend to either conform or rebel.
Yeah.
So which one were you?
Um, I would say in school I was definitely your very like goody two shoes,
Mm-hmm.
really good
Straight
at
A
school, straight A
student.
student, all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
However, I did a lot of stuff outside of school. I'd started performing professionally when I was 16. I was very curious about a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things. So I think I was rebellious in challenging certain systems, but outside of school. In school, I was very
Okay.
everyone,
I think you would have enjoyed school, right? Like, did you have a good time in school?
I did. I had a great time in high school. Middle school was a little bit challenging. When I moved to India, I first went to an international school, and then I moved to an ICSE
Mm-hmm.
school. And the international school was challenging because there was just a lot of. I think the kids just had different priorities. Like I really enjoyed studying,
Mm-hmm.
and many of the kids were there for other reasons. And I faced a lot of bullying at that school actually. To the degree that it ended with this guy chasing me around with a saw. Like it was really intense. Yeah,
What?
yeah,
In middle school?
in middle school.
Someone was chasing you with a saw. What
Yeah,
happened?
I mean that specific instance, we had this. I mean, it was an international school, right? So they called it design technology,
Mm-hmm.
basically woodwork class,
Okay.
and I had created some design that the teacher really liked, so he stepped out to go grab me a special tool. Now, we were all
Okay.
11, right? So at that point you assume people know how to trust themselves around power tools. But this kid
Right.
who for the past whole year had been, emotionally, physically bullying me, in that moment just decided to pick up one of the saws and start chasing me around the room. And
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
by the time, luckily,
That's
the teacher,
scary.
it was very scary. By the time the teacher came back, he wasn't able to do any damage, but I was, for lack of a better word, and I don't minimize this, but I was traumatized, right? And so I was like on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
shaking. Um, my mom had to come to school, and I remember she literally like scooped me up off the floor. And you know how, um, so I saw, I saw like Ma Kali and my mom that day, if that makes sense, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh,
and
like
she was just like, no one fucks with her.
wow,
And
okay.
yeah, and I mean, I left the school shortly after. There were other things too. A lot of bullying from girls. I think it was one of those things where, at that age you have a lot of insecurities, and it
Right.
was just an unfortunate situation. But honestly made me so strong, because all the like girl issues and all of that people tend to have in high school. I was done with all of
Yeah.
that by the time I was 11. So
My goodness. You're talking about it so calmly and like so maturely, like, I was done with it. It was okay. But I'm sure, like, at that time, it would have been really hard, right? Like, when
yeah.
everyone is kind of ganging up against you.
Oh, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It was it was one of those, it was just very petty, for example. It was a situation of this girl was upset that I had become friends with a girl that she wanted to be friends with,
Oh,
classic
yeah.
8, 9-year-old drama. and,
Yeah.
and as a result just took it upon herself to turn the whole girl squad against me. So they would, we'd have art class, for example, and there's a number of
Mm-hmm.
chairs, and the empty chair, they dump all their bags so I couldn't sit.
Oh,
So I know. So I
no.
was like, you know what,
Okay.
Tika, I'll go sit with the boys. And then it was also
Mm-hmm.
the age where they had started having crushes on those boys, and I was becoming good friends with their crushes. So it made
Oh, okay.
led to an even more intense cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
of course I can laugh about it now. At the time, it was a huge, it affects you, but I think it's a question of how you let it affect your trajectory, right? Do you learn from it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand? Like, for example, I think at the time, one thing that I realized, and that's why when I moved to the other school, it was really important to know that for myself, was yes, there were these situations and people were not acting fairly, but also I think to some degree, I had let myself be treated as a victim. And so it taught
Mm-hmm.
me a lot more about self-confidence. And so by the time I, 12, 13, I didn't really put up with any bullshit,
Yeah, you learn to stand up for yourself, basically, yeah?
essentially.
Yeah.
I think what happens is in school, I don't know if you felt this way. Often everyone is working toward a similar goal, right? Whether that's getting a
Mm-hmm.
really good grade or your exams or getting into a good college. And so it tends to be this hyper competitive environment, of course, depending on the nature
Mm-hmm.
of it. And so I think that it's quite unfortunate because not everybody gets to be their fullest selves in school. I also have
Mm-hmm.
seen with some of my friends, for example, who just weren't suited to the academic nature of school, so they didn't do super well in school. But then when they were able to pursue things that they truly were passionate about afterward,
Mm-hmm.
they just came into their own, right? So I just think that the
Yeah.
structures of school, they're cool and important, and education's important. I just think that there needs to be changes to the way the system is and what they prioritize to prioritize each type of individual strength of students and people.
Yeah. And it plays a huge role on developing self confidence as well, right? Because if you do well
For
academically,
sure.
then you get praised by teachers, then you have a great sense of self. And if you're bad, then you think, okay, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I can't do anything. Where in fact, you have skills where you excel at. So I'm at least
Exactly.
glad they have that space once they graduate. They have that space to explore that. But you've been involved with music from a very young age. You've been learning music, performing, and with a lot of people, they also learn music, they also perform from a young age, but all of that kind of stops once you finish class 12. Once you
Mhm.
go into college, you're like, okay, now I'm set for the corporate life, music is going to be a side hustle. But you took it a step further, you took a gap year to do theater in Mumbai, and you seemed very focused that music was going to be your thing. Was this always the plan that you were going to pursue music professionally?
It certainly was not always the plan. I think for
Uh-huh.
me, music had always been a huge part of my life, as you mentioned, and like for a lot of people. The reason I felt a little bit more strongly about it, perhaps, is because growing up, I also had a lot of physical health difficulties, and
Right.
through many of them, music had been the thing that was the savior, for lack of a better word. It was a healing tool, and so I
Mm-hmm.
knew, particularly, I had this one incident when I was 15. I had a loss of vision because of a brain virus and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of different things, and music was really the thing that really got me through that. And I just knew that no matter what I did in life, I knew music had to be a part of it. For the
Right.
longest time, I thought that I would be in, because I care very deeply about health and education, I thought I might be in the
Yeah.
global health space. I studied that in college too, and somehow combine
Mm-hmm.
music and media with that. But when I was 16, I want to say, um, I participated in our school play, and somebody had come to see me, and they heard me sing, and they were like, "Hey, I think you have a lot of potential. Would you
Mm-hmm.
consider, being part of these productions?" So I started doing productions outside of school, and essentially singing professionally in productions like the Vagina Monologues or Emotional
Mm-hmm.
Creature, and all of these shows that were coming to India. And so by the time I graduated, I'd been offered this role in the Cedar Show, which was an acting and singing role. And at the time, I was pretty clear that I wanted to give music and the performing arts a shot, but I didn't know what that
Mm-hmm.
looked like. So that became a nice anchor to say, hey, I'm 17. I am
Right.
responsibility free, relatively,
Mm-hmm.
and so I really want to give this a shot and understand what that means. And I never
Mm-hmm.
imagined that I would do it professionally. During that year, I also started writing music. I was performing a ton. I was still doing stuff in the global health space, but it solidified for me that I loved being on stage. I loved being an artist. And, the beauty of that is that you're able to connect with people, not just intellectually, but also emotionally. Sometimes you just love it because it makes you feel something,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're able to have that emotional connect, it allows you to also use your voice, metaphorically and literally in ways beyond
Mm-hmm.
that, where you're able to talk about things that affect people, that matter. And so my logic at the time was, if I'm one day lucky enough to have a platform of some nature, I'll be able
Mm-hmm.
to use, the emotional and literal part of my voice, and hopefully this
Mm-hmm.
metaphorical voice, and amplify other things, right? um, and so that became the journey of starting music. And so when I got to college, I was studying psychology and global health,
Right.
at Harvard, and I was also doing a dual degree at the Berklee College of Music, which was nice because I was able to do both passions.
But that's
um,
really hard. How did you manage handling both?
um, it was not easy. Also, I was the first person to do it. um,
Yeah.
which sounds,
Congrats.
thank you. I mean, it sounds cool and everything, but let me tell you, when you're the guinea pig, no one knows what's going on, so you have to just
Right.
figure shit out. But if you're a pushy guinea pig, you tend to get what you want. So because I was the first person to do this,
Mm-hmm.
they had a certain set of requirements, and then I was like, hey, can I actually also do this? And they're like, we don't see why not,
Oh.
and then also this, and then like, sure. And so I was able to get my way and really maximize my time in
Mm-hmm.
those systems. And I was really grateful, because when in life do you get the opportunity to learn from some of the best minds in the world in diverse subjects and spaces that you're
Yeah.
super passionate about? So I was super grateful for that time. It wasn't easy. I mean, now they're both institutions, but they were both and they're both in the same city. They're both in Boston. They were half an hour
Right.
bus ride away. There were times when I was on that bus multiple times a day. I would take, and I barely ate food in like the dining
Mm-hmm.
hall. I would take food in a cup, eat it, be talking to my parents on the side, doing an assignment while I'm in the bus. So I've
Oh no.
or I remember I would be, because I started performing professionally too. So I'd perform, when I was in New York, Boston. I'd come back to India quite
Mm-hmm.
often. I remember I was, performing these shows, and backstage I was like writing an essay that was due in 2 hours, and go sing, come back, submit
Oh
it.
my goodness.
It was
Oh my
hectic.
goodness. How much did you sleep during that time?
Um, More than I slept during the pandemic. So
Really?
yeah, the pandemic really messed with my sleep schedule. But no, I think part of it is also when you're so passionate, right? You tend to run on
Mm-hmm.
passion and ambition. And I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
necessarily healthy. Like I'm really grateful that now I'm starting to put in checks and balances, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that you're able to make time for things you enjoy and love. And I was just honestly just so grateful to be there, that I was like, let me
Yeah.
please maximize this whole experience in the best way
Yeah.
possible, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. And like for anyone hearing about this, you're like, oh, that's such a wonderful opportunity. You must be like, and you are a very accomplished, a very confident, a very articulate person. But people see all of this confidence and they think, if I was there, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
But I'm sure even you would have had your butterflies because you were doing this for the first, no one else had ever done this, right? There was a lot of uncertainty. And also you're surrounded by the best minds in the world, and that
Yeah.
can get quite intimidating. What were those first few months at Harvard and Berkeley like for you?
It definitely, there's this sense that people say of imposter syndrome that totally
Right.
exists. I had a
Mm-hmm.
full year at Harvard before the Berkeley program started, so even just there's enough imposter syndrome. But what I
Right.
realized is, everyone at the end of the day is human. Like, sure, you might have won the biggest spelling bee in the world, or be on your way to figuring out how
Right.
to cure cancer. Like, that's awesome, but you're also a human, and we're all
Mm-hmm.
staying in shitty dorms. We have to deal
Mm-hmm.
with sharing bathrooms and possibly rats, and like all of the those experiences I think bond you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one thing I realized is I expected everybody to be absolutely brilliant, and that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the case. And I'm not saying that people aren't brilliant, but what I'm saying is that it just so happened that these were the X number of students chosen that year.
Right.
And, we had the opportunity to be in that space, but we could have very easily been replaced, right? So I think there was a
Mm-hmm.
sense of gratitude among a lot of people, and everyone just was human, and like I said, dealing with those things. One thing
Yeah.
that I loved about the energy though was we talked about how high school can feel very competitive because you're all working toward
Yeah.
similar goals. What I loved about that environment was that everybody was ambitious, but we were all equally
Mm-hmm.
ambitious about different things, right? So if one of my
Right.
if my roommate is into astrophysics and my other roommate's is pre-med, um, we all are supporting each other and really ambitious, but we're not going to be stepping on
Mm-hmm.
on each other's toes, right? And so that
Yeah.
competitive spirit, it can exist if you wanted to, and I know people who felt competitive at college, but for me, because I was doing such bizarrely different things from
Yeah.
everybody else, like when I was at Harvard, people are like, oh, how's your music stuff, and when I was at Berkeley, people were like, how's your brain stuff, right? So no one understood, and I was like,
Yeah.
I think it was just cool to be surrounded by people who were there, wanted to learn. And I also really, really appreciated how diverse the environments were, not just
Yeah.
racially, but socioeconomically, just in general, right? People were just from very different backgrounds of life. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that teaches you a lot when you surround yourself with that diversity.
Yeah. I think that's something that, that changes you, I think, as a person,
Yeah.
makes you more open to new experiences and other people and more accepting. And so I hope like more people get this kind of opportunity.
I
Even
agree.
even if they're not going abroad, even within India itself, to move out of your own city itself,
Yeah.
right? That's a huge thing because I think you learn a lot just by interacting with people from different backgrounds.
I think even within India, I see this too much, and it makes me sad. Colleges here are
Mm-hmm.
very diverse, right? Even if you're
Right.
within the same city, you go to a college, you have students from all across the country and
Mm-hmm.
very different backgrounds, right? And in this case, religiously, caste backgrounds, whatever
Yeah.
it might be. But what tends to happen, and I've seen this too often, especially with kids from metro cities like Delhi, Bombay, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
is they'll stick to what they know and the kinds of people they've grown up with.
Yeah.
But you have diversity at your fingertips. You have the ability to befriend people, or even if you don't befriend them in a way that because people lean on comfort. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something important about putting yourself out of your comfort zone, right? Spaces where you have to live outside of your home, outside of your comfort zone, that allows you
Mm-hmm.
to push your boundaries. But in general, I see too many students who, you know, and I can speak for Bombay, but they've grown up, say, in South Bombay. They'll go to these colleges.
Yeah.
They'll just hang out with other South Bombay kids. And I'm like, seriously, you have people from all over
Yeah.
the country, right? You are able to, India
Mm-hmm.
is one of the most diverse countries in the entire world.
Yeah.
You have the ability to expose yourself to languages, cultures, cuisines, just ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's just, I really hope people push themselves out of their bubbles because you can find that anywhere. It's not just
Yeah.
these experiences, right? And I say that because for example, during my gap year, I was in Bombay. I feel like I had some of the most diverse experiences there. I feel like now in life, I of course split time, but when I'm in India, I sometimes am so mind boggled by the amount of diversity. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a huge priority to me to surround myself with what I call intellectual diversity, meaning
Right.
if you're constantly surrounded by people who think similarly to you, are doing similar things to you, that's awesome because you'll get a sense of support. But you'll be stuck in an echo chamber or a bubble. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
super important to surround yourself with people who are doing things very different to you, who think differently to you, whether that's in general, whether that's politically, whether that's just, because it opens up your mind to realizing that your way is not the way of the world.
Correct. And that's something I think a lot of people have to learn, especially, when you're on the internet and you see kind of
Yes.
comments and you're like, oh my God, just go out of your house a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about your content creation journey. And I find yours very interesting because I don't know if your followers notice, but you're very intentional about the kind of content you create. Even when it comes to something like the fonts you use, it's very different from what everybody else uses. It's consistent throughout all your videos. You have very certain content buckets that you have, like your videos with your RG or some that you speak directly to camera, the ones that you do with music. So you have a content strategy set in place that's very clear and very intentional,
Hmm.
and it's a great learning for someone who wants to learn about personal brand and brand identity. So what was your vision for brand Avanti on social media when you started out?
That's a great question. Um, See, I knew that I wanted to be, by the time I was, in college, I was clear I wanted to be in the performing arts. But if you told me I would be a
Mm-hmm.
YouTuber, I would have said you are out of your mind because
Really?
because it was just something that never crossed my mind. And
Uh-huh.
I graduated college during the pandemic. And so my last semester was online. I had come back to India so I could be with my
Mm.
family. That's what screwed up my sleep schedule because I was sleeping at 9 a.m. every day to stay
Oh,
up for classes.
right. Right, for class. Okay, okay.
And at the time, the plan was to go into the creative industries full time, meaning perform. I used to do a lot of public speaking, but pandemic hit, we were all in our homes, and that was
Mm-hmm.
not to be. And I could have, of course, pivoted, gone into a separate space, but I realized
Mm-hmm.
that the internet is a huge tool for building digital community, and it became really appealing to me. And I was like, okay, let's figure out how this works. And the reason I say let's
Mm-hmm.
figure out how this works is because I was not a kid who grew up on the internet. I didn't have a Facebook
Okay.
till I was like 17. And the only reason I joined Facebook was because I used to do Model United Nations, and one conference they were lobbying on Facebook groups. So I made a Facebook account.
Oh no.
I
Oh my God. Okay.
I made an Instagram page when I was 20 because I was releasing my first song. So I never used these
Mm-hmm.
tools as personal, so therefore I don't have these embarrassing things I put on my wall or have
Oh yeah.
like
I actually like scroll down to the bottom of your Instagram page to kind of get a sense of what your journey was like. And I'm like, beginning when you started with music, like, and it was these professional shots. I'm
yeah,
like, where are your embarrassing pictures? Have you hidden them? But didn't you
no.
ever feel FOMO? Like all your friends are on Instagram and Facebook and they had their own conversations around that. Didn't you ever feel like, hey, maybe I should also join and see what's
Not
going on?
not really. I think it's because I had those experiences in middle school where I didn't care about
Mm-hmm.
conformity in a social sense. I cared about being good
Okay.
at school, but oh, everybody's doing this, so you should do this. I never cared about that. If I cared about
Mm-hmm.
that, I wouldn't do what I've done, essentially. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, social media was super new, and as a result, it took me a lot of learning because for people who've
Okay.
grown up on it, they're super natural with
Mm-hmm.
it, right? For me, I
Mm-hmm.
had to learn a lot because you can't initially when I, like you said, when I first put out music, etc., and I wasn't looking at social media, I used to treat it like a portfolio. New
Yeah.
song, here's photo, okay, performing, bye.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I realized, it's called social media for a reason, where you
Mm-hmm.
have to create connection. And that's something I love doing. I love meeting people. So I'm like, okay, how do I use this medium to do that now?
Uh-huh.
And so when I started, at that point, I'd released a few songs and, we had a sense of demographic and everything, but it was all very scattered. And there was it's not like the data itself showed me what my audience could be or was. So I
Right.
had to have a very conscious decision key. How do I, like, who do I appeal to and why? And so at
Mm-hmm.
the time, I must have been 22. Um, And yeah, I was 22, turning 23, something like that. And I was like, you know what? I am fresh out of college. I naturally in life, I'm an older sister. We had a conversation about,
Yeah.
siblings before we started this
Older
podcast.
sibling traits.
Exactly. I feel like I wear being a Didi on my sleeve. Um, and so I was like, you know what? I think that as a person, I probably would appeal most to teenage girls or young women,
Mm-hmm.
who are maybe slightly younger than me and, might have similar life experiences. Because I was like, I need to have some
Mm-hmm.
sort of a grounding, right? And
Yeah.
that really helped me. Again, I came from an analytical background where I understood
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the startup world or just like general terms, right? So I was like, what's your customer target? What's your segment? This, that. And I was like, okay, it's humans. But I have to
Yeah.
think of it in that way. And what that allowed me to do, which I'm super grateful for, is not care about many other things that people get caught up in the world of social media.
Mm-hmm.
What do I mean by that?
Like? Yeah.
It's the attention economy. So a lot of people care about eyeballs, right? And I've seen
Mm-hmm.
a lot of women feel there's a lot of women who are really comfortable with their bodies and being
Mm-hmm.
able to be comfortable with that. But there's a lot who aren't, and I fall in the latter category. And
Yeah.
sometimes I would see people, including myself, be jealous of women who were comfortable in their bodies and were able to showcase it in a way that they felt empowered, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, to me, at first, I was like, they're getting eyeballs, it's going to help them, blah, 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 blah. But then I realized, you know what? If I'm catering to this segment, if I feel like this is who I appeal to most, I don't have to worry about the male gaze. I don't
Right.
have to cater to that. If men show up, that's awesome for them and good for
Mm-hmm.
them. But anybody
Mm-hmm.
else, they're just along for the ride. And so what,
Yeah.
what started to happen was when I, in addition to the music, when I started to create content, I would, talk at the time, the verticals, if you so to speak, were in the space
Yeah.
of education. Obviously, it just became a natural, way to how do you not gatekeep information about accessing higher
Correct.
education.
Yeah.
Then I, started talking about things that mattered to me and I realized had an importance in particularly in our cultural fabric, taboo topics like
Mm-hmm.
sex or sex ed, mental health, periods, just whether that was me chatting, whether that was chatting with my grandmother, family, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting was like I said, I expected it to be mostly teenage girls or young women. It
Mm-hmm.
immediately became this 50-50 split of young
Mm-hmm.
people. And there was a lot of young boys. And I at first was very confused, right? Because I was
Okay.
like, okay, if you're a 15-year-old boy, hopefully you're not lusting after me in that capacity, And if you are,
Uh-huh.
okay. But the point being, it wasn't like I was showcasing myself in a way that made sense, right? For that gaze. So I was a little bit
Mm-hmm.
confused, but what I started to realize is, for example, when I talk about periods, a lot of young boys, they have nowhere else to go to learn about it because the
Yeah.
women in their home are not talking about it. And so they will
Mm-hmm.
talk to somebody or they will connect with somebody who they feel is able to break certain things down, right? And for
Mm-hmm.
me, being the older sister of a younger brother, even though I
Mm.
care very deeply about um, women being safe and seen, I also recognize that that cannot happen in isolation. So,
Yeah.
I'm not the kind of person who's like, this is just for girls. It's very much you are a
Yeah.
human and whatever appeals to you. And so there were a lot of young men. Like I would say half or more of our fan pages are run by boys. And I was
Whoa.
very
Okay.
confused at first, but it's all of these people, and I've met some of them, and they're very much like, you feel like an older sister to me, because I
Mm-hmm.
have had these, in their words, they've had these toxic male role models or like people who they're surrounded
Mm-hmm.
by. And what I love so much about our culture in general, like Indian and South Asian culture generally, is we have this feeling of apnapan, which in Hindi means the sense of, connection. And when you like
Mm-hmm.
somebody or you feel connected to them, you almost make them family, right? So you will call somebody you
Yeah.
don't know auntie or uncle or
Yeah.
akka or didi or whatever. And so that to me felt amazing because all these people, they felt that familial sense, and then I involved my
Mm-hmm.
actual real life family in things. So then they felt even more of a connection.
Yeah.
So it became really fascinating. And I think it's one of those things where from a, content strategy point of view, as you were asking, on one hand, you
Mm-hmm.
have to have like, hey, who do I think I appeal to and who am I creating for? But as
Yeah.
you start to learn more about your audience, understand how to grow with that.
Yeah, I see that in your content. You're very matter of fact about things, especially like you mentioned taboo topics like
Yeah.
sex and masturbation. You talk about it like very matter of fact in the sense that it's normal. Yeah, it is. And we should talk about it openly. Like, no need to do ho, he, who, and all that, right? Uh, and you've also, I mean, you've been doing short form content on Instagram, you do long form content on YouTube, plus you do music, you write your own music, and now you also have your music videos. For someone who has so many things on their plate, how do you manage giving each vertical its time and space to grow by itself while also managing that all of these are running at the same pace and growing well?
That's a great question and something we've been grappling with for a while because at this
Mm-hmm.
point, I think we've reached a point of baseline. Um, we built a baseline community, right? And now, if we want to
Mm-hmm.
scale to do it well, each one has to run in a good fashion, like you said, right?
Right.
And they each one deserves its time and nurture. Now, in addition to all the stuff people see digitally, I perform a lot offline, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also run a studio business. Like there's many things that are happening that people don't even visibly see. And the only way you're able to do that is number one, managing your time super well. Number two,
Mm-hmm.
building out a team that is really supportive. I'm really grateful. It's taken a long time to build a team that we have, but I'm really grateful for the support, right? Because I think nothing is ever done in isolation. And
Mm-hmm.
and when you're able to, and when I say a team, right, for someone who's starting out, they might be like, yeah, that's easy to say because you can use a team right now. No, from day one, anybody around me who I felt, you know, potential with and we connected, it was really important to me that everybody grew together. So I remember my first couple of music
Okay.
videos, for example, I didn't have the budget or the money to
Mm-hmm.
produce large, pieces of content in that way. So I was like, what resources are available to me? I was in Boston. That's a city that has a lot of colleges. So I reached out to
Mm-hmm.
colleges and students who were studying film and was like, hey, are
Mm-hmm.
you interested in working on this? Many of them would work on it as their, final project. And for
Oh,
them,
nice.
it
Okay.
helped to have a project. So they were super enthusiastic. They're like, hey, can you just pay for our food? I was like, yeah, I'll buy pizza. And,
Mm-hmm.
essentially that's how we made it work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So whatever resources are available to you, I think that's really important to the beauty of content, in my opinion. Music videos and all of that, there's still a certain production quality expectation, but content,
Yeah.
you have your phone and you just go on your phone and anybody from anywhere can build and create and connect, and that's
Yeah.
what I love about this space, that it doesn't discriminate, right? um, I think when it came to the formats of content, long form came very easy to me when I started out
Mm-hmm.
because I was used to public speaking, I was used to chatting. I think
Right.
that conversation helped. And it was different to speak to a camera, but I just pretended the camera was a friend. Um,
Yeah.
and that helped. Short form was very difficult for me when I started out. I didn't understand it
Yeah.
at all. Yeah. Because here's the thing, right? At the time when I started, TikTok was a thing for a hot sec and then it got banned. But
Yeah.
but that culture still exists, right? And I, for example, I can dance and I'm trying to dance more to be comfortable in my body. I have to for
Mm-hmm.
stage. So I'm like, I know that I can move with grace on in my
Mm-hmm.
stage presence, but I'm not a dancer by any means. And I say all of
Yeah.
this because at the time, these dances were really, really popular. And I was like, is that what I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to do to make this
Mm-hmm.
work? Um, and I found myself, I was what, like I said, 22, 23 at the time. I found myself getting jealous of 16-year-old girls. And I was like, hold on, there's a huge, huge, huge problem here, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're in that space, instead of the jealousy, I should have been in admiration that, these
Mm-hmm.
are people who are able to, like, this is something that comes naturally to them. How can I learn? Right. And so I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is cool. Will this help me? Yes, but how can I do it in a way that feels authentic to me? Right. And so for me, one
Right.
space that I knew that I would be good at was if I collaborated with people, because then I would learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I would not feel like I was in my
Mm-hmm.
head. And so I
Mm-hmm.
proceeded to collaborate with several creators, meet a lot of different people from a lot of different parts of
Mm-hmm.
the country, world, different spaces. Like I met creators
Mm-hmm.
from God only knows different types of things. And what that helped me with is, A, I learned a lot because I think a lot of learning happens by experience. B,
Mm-hmm.
got to build a beautiful community. But C, I also was able to understand what worked for me and what didn't, you know, where I was
Yeah.
able to see that trial and error just firsthand. Um,
Yeah.
And when it comes to managing different verticals, you know, I appreciate that you think that there's a lot of intentionality. There really is. I think no, but I think for some people I can be confusing, and I totally recognize that, right? Because
Mm.
especially when it comes to, you know, there's all these awards and things like that, right? And then people
Yeah,
try to
what
do.
category do you fit in? Like, are you music? Are you education? Are you, which is hard for someone like you who's a multi hyphenate who
Yeah,
you do many things. So it's hard for you to box yourself in one category.
for
And I'm sure
sure.
people would have told you, right? Like, oh, you should just concentrate on music, or
Yeah,
you should just concentrate on education, have a niche, as they
yeah,
say. But
exactly.
this is something a lot of people struggle with when they start with content, is like you mentioned about not knowing how to dance, right? Everyone thinks that, oh, should I, like doctors who dance and they say this is how you get gonorrhea, ooh,
Yeah,
you know, like it's that dissonance. But it is an interesting and a difficult thing to grapple with, because even I face the same thing, like, what do I do? Because if I feel like I put myself in a box, then I feel like constrained by it, you know, like
yeah.
I don't do only this, right? Like you do music, you do education, you do comedy, you do so many things. So um do you feel like in the future you would want to solidify into one category in itself?
No, I think what I'm trying to do is find ways to create labels that other people can make sense of me, but I know
Okay.
what I want to do, right? So if you are confused by the multi types of, for example, you know, music
Yeah.
or acting or all of these spaces, I'm an entertainer, I'm a performing artist, and whatever you will,
Mm-hmm.
music is the primary medium, but however you want to go about it,
Mm-hmm.
that's what it is, right? And when it comes to other things, I care very deeply about education and health and all of these things. You can call me a social advocate, whatever it is you want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can give you labels to make you make sense to me if that makes it easier on you.
Okay.
But for me, it's very clear that, hey, there's these multiple things I care about. This is the medium of
Mm-hmm.
communication and community. How do I build that? And I recognize people connect from different ways and things, right? There's some people who,
Yeah.
for example, have listened to a song on Spotify, they'll come to some form of social media.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people who've seen a video with my grandmother, they may or may not discover a song, you know? Um,
Yeah.
there's some people who might know more about my personal life than, you know, 10 other people on the internet. And so it's just it's one of those things that it used to bother me, but I've
Mm-hmm.
realized you're coming from whatever medium and you're staying for
Mm-hmm.
me. That's really beautiful and powerful, right? And when I say
Mm-hmm.
me, it's not necessarily me the person, it's me the persona, right? Because there is a difference.
Right.
um
Correct.
but the fact that you've bought into whatever that means to you, that's amazing, right? and and
Mm-hmm.
and, and I should be grateful for that. The other thing,
Yeah.
when you are a multi hyphenate but also you create in different verticals, a lot of people are confused about how to start that out, right? And
Yeah.
you can have several different types of pages, for example, and that works for some. For some, like
Mhm.
I decided to consolidate most of mine, which leads to a
Mhm.
slower burn. I may not get, you know, quicker numbers that way, but I think it builds stronger
Mhm.
community. So it's just it's one
Yeah.
of those trade-offs, right? But what I've realized is, for example, if you're somebody who's listening or watching who's starting out and you're like, I do more than one thing, but I'm really scared of
Yeah.
introducing this other concept because people, it won't do
Mhm.
well, engagement. You have to do what I call the sandwich method, right? You kind of have to, it's like,
Mhm.
you know, this one particular thing works. Let's say you do comedy sketch, you know, that works. Okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, do the comedy sketches, but on Tuesday and Thursday, insert something else. Just so that people
Mhm.
start to get used to seeing that sandwiched in between other
Mhm.
things they're used to, because then it helps break away from that mold. Because the danger of the niche is that you only get known for that specific thing, and it becomes
Yeah.
harder for
And you
you to
get
branch
burnt out
out.
as a creator.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because you do the same thing over and over again. It might be fun for your audience, but it's never fun for you then. Because
No.
you want to try something different, right?
Yeah.
And then by then it's too late. Your audience has this identity of you. Then, like, why is she doing this
Yeah.
also? Yeah. But did you ever feel this? So, especially creating on short form content, like a space like Instagram, where you constantly see numbers fluctuating, right?
Yeah.
And you know that a certain kind of content works. Have you ever felt like, okay, I tried this experiment, it didn't work. Maybe I should just give this up altogether. Like, it doesn't work on this platform, it doesn't work for me. Have you had those experiments that have kind of not launched?
For sure. But I I don't view it as a failure of the thing I'm trying to do. I just view it as people haven't bought into that or been exposed to it. So there's two or three
Mm-hmm.
approaches. Either you can say, okay, I'm going to go ham and do this over and over and over again until people get used to it or it picks off. Or you can say,
Yeah.
hey, this is what I actually care about with this specific space. How do I do it
Mm-hmm.
in ways that I can combine that work, right? For example, um, with some original music, right? There's a lot of people promoting their original music on platforms, and there's
Yeah.
many, many ways to go about it. I've tried various different forms, and I found that the ways in which people connect with it most is if it connects to them, right?
Yeah.
And I've tried ways in which other songwriters will be like, so I have a song for you, and sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't, but it doesn't
Yeah.
always feel as authentic, right? So I'm like, what feels authentic to me? How can I use? And I
Mm-hmm.
felt that way about trends forever. There's all these
Yeah.
trends that exist. I think it's it's super valuable to learn how to use those trends and make them your own rather than just copying them.
Mm-hmm.
Because then,
Yeah.
sure, you might get eyeballs as a result of the upward tick, but are people invested in you? Or are people invested in
Mm-hmm.
your particular take on something, right? Um,
Yeah.
and as the creator economy is becoming more and more and more crowded, you need to have a solid identity, whatever that is, that makes people understand who you are, and that can come for some people from a specific vertical or niche, but that can come for
Mm-hmm.
people for like, this is who I am, and these are the multiple ways in which I express it, right? Um,
Yeah.
and of course, now with algorithms changing, all of this, do I get stressed like everybody else does about this not having as much engagement and numbers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Naturally,
Oh, the numbers.
the numbers. But
Yeah.
it's about how you measure impact, right? Yes, do
Mm-hmm.
the numbers matter? For sure. They also help you with money, positioning, etc. But
Mm-hmm.
is it more valuable to me that something has impacted somebody in a way that they've been felt compelled enough to write you a letter, send you a
Mm-hmm.
message, talk to you about how this has affected their relationship with their family, whatever it might be, or the way they think about
Mm-hmm.
something, or how this song got them through this rough phase in their life? That to me means way more than, okay, this has been shown to 100,000 more people, you know?
Mm. Yeah. You also mentioned about creating the way you market your music and trying different methods to do that. Um, what happens when it comes to creating music itself? Because music is very personal to you, but you also wanted to connect to your audience. So how do you balance your artistic vision versus the music industry and what your audience is expecting?
Oh, that's a whole conversation. Because I've tried all of the above. When I first started
Mm-hmm.
out, it was, okay, let's learn how to do this. This was way back in
Right.
2017, 2018. Then I started writing. I would start co-writing with different people because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let's bring people's expertise and lenses. I have some songs that I think are really fun, and they were written for, let's try to appeal to audience,
Right.
um,
Mm.
and they're meant for that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then I have songs that I was like, okay, these are themes I really care about in the world. How can I
Mm-hmm.
express them, right? So I had an EP, which is a mini album essentially that we launched in 2021 called Double Standards, and it has
Mm-hmm.
songs about things like jealousy, consent, gender equity,
Yeah.
stereotypes, blah blah blah. And it connected with people. It connected with me. I think it also connected with our audience at the time. Again, there were some things. It was like, for example, the song Double Standards, which till day I am so mad at myself that I did not name correctly. So the song, a lot of people recognize it as chal because that's the like
Yes,
catchphrase.
I was just
Yes,
gonna say, yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
And I know for a fact, had I named the song Chal, it would have had 5x, 10x the streams it does today.
Yeah.
Because people are probably
Because that's
searching.
how people search for it, right?
Exactly. So I, keep kicking
Uh,
myself because people know the song. In fact, sometimes when people make roast videos of me, they use the song and they'll be like, no, 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 chill heart. And I'm like, you know what? That's amazing. You're also promoting my song without realizing it, but
yeah.
thank you.
Okay. It's only now that I'm realizing that Chalhat, the song title is Double Standards.
Exactly.
Oh, because that was a great, like, it was a great song. But also, it was a great way to have people make videos on it because you could have
Exactly.
any situation, right? Na 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 na,
Chill
Chalhat.
heart.
Na 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 na, Chalhat. Yeah, like, like being on Instagram, it's one
Yeah,
of those songs where, when you're scrolling on Instagram, you learn of it. It's like one of
of
those songs.
course. Of course. And it was funny
So,
because when we created it, it wasn't necessarily for the internet. It was just, I
mhm.
was so frustrated. And I remember when I was writing it, and I had a co writer for this too, my friend Natanya, and she and I were writing this song over WhatsApp because she was in LA at the time. I was in Bombay. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to say fuck off, but I can't say fuck off, right? And then she's like, that
Uh-huh.
makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
and I was like, I just want to say a bit like chal hatt, you know? And she's like, wait, that's a great
Mm-hmm.
idea. And I was like, no, that's
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And she's like, no, it's not crazy. People would love to
Uh-huh.
say chal hatt, right? And I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
Sure. And then no, was actually a placeholder for lyrics. We were gonna create a whole lyric bed. But then you know what? It was just like no. It just became this thing. I was like, okay, cool.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this backstory.
Yeah.
Oh. Hmm.
I mean, we're very intentional with the songs. Like I'll give you an example. A lot of people don't know this, but there's a song of mine called Permission on the same album.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about consent. And if you hear the song, the production and the way the I've sung it, it's meant to be sexy, and it's meant to be, you know, one of those things you could add to your bedroom playlist,
Yeah.
essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before writing the song, I researched the BPM, which is the beats per minute or the rhythm of the average
Mm-hmm.
bedroom playlist song.
Okay.
And essentially, the song is created to the average thrusting speed. Um,
Oh, okay.
and the reason for that was because the song, it has subliminal messages about permission,
Mm-hmm.
admission, consent, all of this. We didn't want it to be in your face, you know, no means no, because we want consent to feel sexy. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's just asking for
Mm-hmm.
permission, and you know, you can do it in a sexy way. And the whole point being, we wanted it to be something that you could add to your bedroom playlist, just something you might enjoy, but in the
Mm-hmm.
background has those subliminal messages too. So, no.
Oh, I see that. Nice. Nice. Oh, guys, Avanti is a genius. You should just know that. She's going to take over the world. Okay, Avanti, 2050 president,
Oh god.
prime minister.
The thing about my journey with music though is it's evolved over time. I think it became this thing, okay, this is this medium I can express through. It's this tool where I can talk about things that matter in a fun, accessible way. And then
Mm-hmm.
it became my space of emotional catharsis and my best friend. Over the past several months, 8+ months, I think I've written 20 songs. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
I've had my own emotional roller coaster for multiple reasons over the last, 8 months, and
Mm-hmm.
music became that form of catharsis. Like I felt something. I'd wake up in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. and have some sort of melody idea. I'd like record it, go back to sleep.
I want to see your voice memos. I
Oh,
think that'd be very
dude,
interesting.
my voice memos and notes, if anybody sees them, they'd be like, what is this person's brain?
Oh man.
Yeah.
You've always been very open and transparent on the internet. Very matter of fact as well. And when you went through a breakup, you were very transparent with the audience as well.
Hmm.
And as a content creator, I understand that because your partner was on your page and
Yeah.
you've spoken about them. So naturally, you'll feel like your audience should know, right? And because I'm sure people would have kept asking, where is he? What's happening? And speculating and stuff. But I think when it reached a wider audience than you had intended, probably, and the wider internet didn't get it because they didn't know who you are.
Yeah.
They didn't understand why you were talking about this. And there's a lot of backlash. And people started making fun of it because they didn't get it. They didn't get the context. They just saw you as this girl on the internet. And that must have been a very rough time, right? Because it's hard enough going through a breakup, but you have like a million people weighing in their opinions. I don't know how you got through it. Like, what was that phase like for you?
It was really tough, for a lot of people. They don't see that side. I'm used to getting trolled and hate on the internet because I talk about taboo topics, right? But when
Right.
somebody says, "Oh, sex suks ki batein," it makes me
Yeah.
talk about it even more, right? Because I realize the
Mm-hmm.
need for the awareness. But when someone is attacking your person based on a meme they've seen or
Yeah.
someone's roast video, and they haven't seen the primary source, they haven't,
Yeah.
bothered to check out anything else, um, it hurts because but then I had to really, really, really explain to myself that, hey, listen, this is the person you are, this is the persona. If someone's only seen a
Yeah.
meme and someone's only seen something else, they're going to have an impression, and that's okay. You can't control it, right? Like, how much
Mm-hmm.
do we actually know about Salt Bay? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm sure if someone
Yeah.
sees him, they'll be like, ooh, right? So
Yeah.
if someone has seen a meme of me crying or going through a breakup, they'll be like, breakup ladki. I get it,
Oh yeah.
right? I get the
Mm-hmm.
psychology behind it. Does that make it easier? No. Um, it was really tough because it, for whatever reason, there was nothing else going on the internet in the world of our, little YouTube world for those 2 weeks. So it just
Mm-hmm.
became this amplified effect. You had comedians and YouTubers and just like everybody just doing their own thing, making
Piling
content out
on,
of it.
right?
Yeah, people
Yeah.
launched full YouTube channels off of this. And
I know. They they capitalized off of you.
yeah, and
And I was like,
their biggest thing was like she's capitalizing and making song of, and I'm like, bro,
yeah.
what are you doing? Like I remember
At
this.
least here it's your story.
what what I think clinched it for me. So from a personal level, it was really tough to deal with because
Yeah.
I had friends who were super supportive, but many of them didn't know what it was like to deal with the public side, right? So they were there for me
Yeah.
emotionally, but they didn't understand the public side. There were a handful of people who understood the public side too. Um, and I was extremely grateful for them because anybody else I talked to, they could be empathetic, but they didn't know what it's like. Um,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of, actually, it made my rose-colored glasses, this is sad, but it made my rose-colored glasses about the creator industry really come off. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because I thought, oh, I have so many friends in this space. Like, I really like people hanging out, meeting, collaborating.
Yeah.
And what I slowly realized is that a lot of people, it felt like high school, or for me specifically, middle school again. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what is happening? Because people would come up to me who I thought I was good friends with, and they'd be like, oh, people know we're close, so they're like asking me questions, and I'm just, whatever. And basically, they were just trying to say that people are coming to them with gossip and that they're like the gossip gatekeepers and this and that. And I was like, hold on one second. So now I
What?
feel really weird about telling you anything because if I tell you
Yeah.
something, it's going to become this. Is that what you're saying? Um, and yeah, it became really, really strange. Like I distinctly remember about a week after I went to this event. It was at, I think, the Facebook office or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was there. You're, you know, everyone was there. And people
Mm-hmm.
came up and I didn't have people pull me to the side and they were like, hey, listen, I think what you did was really brave. I have been dealing with something similar. I could never, blah, 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 blah. And they would say all
Mm-hmm.
of these things. And it was really sweet of them to say to me in private, saying, I also have been seeing the trolling. It must be really hard. And
Mm-hmm.
Satya, when it came to the trolling, like it got to the degree that people were like, I mean, there were Reddit threads about, and this is huge trigger warning, but there were Reddit threads about ways in which
Mm-hmm.
people wanted to rape me. It got really intense. Um,
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And it was for what? For me talking about. Funny enough, had I broken up with my partner, it would have been tenfold. This was me talking
Mm-hmm.
about, a situation, just my emotions. And people were seeing that. When the average person may not have seen it, and I didn't want to add fuel to the fires. I wasn't talking about all of these
Mm-hmm.
things, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
creators saw it. They knew it was going on, and no one said anything. And that made me really sad. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, there's been situations where people have said weird things about people. You speak up about it, but in this situation you say nothing because you're scared. That's okay, you're totally entitled to that. But it made me realize, these are not friends, these are colleagues.
Yeah.
um and
Ouch.
I know it was really sad because I was very much like la 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 la, and I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
D- do you regret talking about your breakup on social media?
No. um because the amount of outpouring of people sharing their own vulnerabilities as a result was huge. I
Mm-hmm.
remember the first 48 hours, we had tens of thousands of people reaching out with their own stories. And just something
Mm.
as simple as I felt so similarly emotionally, and I thought I was like, they thought they were crazy for feeling that way. And seeing
Mm.
somebody actually express their emotions in that way, they felt validated, right? Funny enough, many, it's been a year and a half more at this point. People reach out today, very high profile people and just random people, just being like, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? I had never experienced heartbreak and now I've gone through the worst one in my life. And I can't even imagine how you did that. And they'll be like, no, do you need tips to get
Yeah.
over a breakup? I'm like, okay, sure.
Oh my
Happy to.
goodness.
You know how
Yeah.
it is. And when I say super high
Yeah.
profile people, talking super high profile people. So it's very
Mm-hmm.
interesting. I'm like, it all comes back, and I get it. Look, before I dealt with that kind of heartbreak and pain, if somebody had talked about their heartbreak, I'd be like, okay, good for you. I'm sure it hurts, but move on with life.
Mm.
And then when I dealt with it, I was like, this kind of pain is intense, and I've never dealt with this in this way. And because I'd also already been so open and vulnerable with my audience about so many things, I'm like, if
Mhm.
I talk about the good things, I might as well talk about these because it's a part of me, it's a part of who I am, and I need to process this,
Mhm.
right? I did it number one for myself. I did it number two because I knew there would be people who had probably gone through something similar, and I did it in a way that it was that emotional catharsis, but it was also real. Because if I'm just being like,
Mhm.
oh, look, I am on this billboard and I'm on this that,
Yeah.
cool. But like, no, this whole past month, I wasn't able to move for 5 days straight. I was,
Mhm.
and it's not to attract sympathy or pity. It's just that these are realities of life. In the extreme joyous moments, there's also extreme sadness and vulnerability. Um,
Yeah.
Also, like you said, I'd been public with my relationship, right? And we'd been
Mhm.
together for 6 years. It's not like two
Yeah.
months, whatever. 6 years is a long time. Like we were on the way to, reaching other milestones or whatever. And it's okay that it didn't
Yeah.
work out. Looking back now, I'm actually extremely grateful because I learned a lot about myself, about how that would likely not have been the right longer term relationship. Um, but at the
Mhm.
time, it hurt, right? And there were so many things, and I think um, the hardest part to deal with, right, is you trying to figure out how to navigate that, because I'd been public about that relationship for a year, right, of the six, and people had grown to
Yeah.
feel connected to my ex-partner as well, and he is a wonderful person, right? And so I
Mm.
know that um had I not said anything, people would have come and been, had I just not said anything in general, people would have constantly been asking about it, right? Because it would have been this void. Had I
Yeah.
just said, okay, breakup has happened, bye bye, people would have assumed a billion things and they would have come for him, you know. And so I felt a
Mm.
sense of, I felt a sense of duty to be like, I need to share something. And everything I said, I literally only said, logistically, this is the situation, he no longer wants to be here and this
Mhm.
doesn't work out for us longer term, and I'm feeling sad about it because we had made these XYZ plans, and I'm also dealing
Yeah.
with heartbreak, right? I said nothing about him. And
Mhm.
it became this whole thing, and I was like, you know what, it's okay. It showed me a lot of the toxic side of the internet.
Yeah.
The funny thing was, I released a song a short while after, and so many people's commentary was, oh my god, this bitch released a song to monetize her breakup, and I was like, you know what.
Oh no.
But what was funny was people in the comments were like, hey, so you have no problem when Taylor Swift does this, when Ariana Grande does this, when
Mm.
other artists you listen to, Justin Bieber does this. But because it's someone you feel
Mhm.
like you know, is that what makes
Mm.
it weirder for you? You know? Um,
Yeah.
and is it because they're Indian, right? Because if you think about it, we love heartbreak, pain, emotions, but we're so used to it. No, our
Yeah.
songs, our films are about that. But we're used to it in the context of fantasy, in the context of film,
Mhm.
or in the context of reality TV. Rarely do we see somebody who is a real person and has control over their own narrative and platform being able to share and express in ways that are authentic to them,
Yeah.
you know?
I also, it's different when you're a viewer and when you're a creator. A
Yeah.
creator would understand it, a viewer would not. Because a viewer only sees you, like you said, a persona, as a
Yeah,
product. Like they think they know you, but they also have this image of you,
of
right?
course.
And if you don't conform to their expectations, then it's that dissonance comes in. Um, it's interesting, like I would have, like most people when they announce a breakup, they just put up, that text post, like you had also put up
Yeah,
that text post, and they just leave it at that. But I think people were confused, why, I guess you were talking about it more publicly, where usually you would just talk about it with your friend. So
yeah.
I think they were confused, and they thought you were trying to monetize it in that sense, that you were making it public,
That's
right?
okay.
Which is a fair assumption, but I mean, as a creator, I understand, because it's such a huge part of your life,
Yeah,
and when you're used to sharing, like you mentioned, you're used to sharing the good and the bad, like it feels dishonest to your audience,
truly.
where you're suffering so much internally, but on Instagram, you're like, oh, hey, your
Hey,
pani puri, your
exactly.
bada
The
pav.
thing is, though, I waited. I mean, I didn't share it immediately, right? I took time to process. I waited 6 weeks, almost 2 months before I shared it publicly. The breakup happened
Mm,
in March. I shared it in May. And I needed that time to process. And initially, when I'd filmed all of these things, I filmed myself the day after. Because
mm-hmm.
also for the last 2 years, I've been talking to a camera every single day of my life. So it has become my
Yeah.
space of catharsis. And what people saw
Mm-hmm.
was a fraction. I was talking to my camera for 3 hours, just letting it out.
Mm,
Then I was
mm,
like, okay, let me do a check in a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And I filmed all of that for myself initially. It was a video journal, for lack of a better word. And it became this thing
mm-hmm.
where what people see is a fraction. I,
Yeah.
and what was looking back at it, I haven't looked at it in a long time. But I remember a few months after whatever, looking back at those videos was so healing for me because I was able to see my progress every week. And
Mm,
that's what was really useful and powerful. So when I felt comfortable sharing small parts of those, part of it was from my own healing, but part of it was realizing for a lot of people, they need to see that progress, right?
yeah.
And look, there was, like you said, this hate reached from people who didn't know, but from the people who
Yeah.
knew, or from people who had the number of people, I can't even begin to explain to you the number of people who like recently have gone through some form of heartbreak, who constantly reach
Mm-hmm.
out being like, literally, people have sent me DMs saying, I thought you were a dumb bitch, but now my heart is so broken. I think I'm the biggest asshole in the world. I'm so sorry for thinking that about you. And please
Uh,
help me get through this.
I will write a song, you stream it 100 times, watch it on YouTube, get me some revenue.
Oh God. No, I mean whatever
Uh,
people connect with, right? And
hmm.
yeah, I'm I have been a little bit more guarded about my private life for the last, year as a result.
Yeah.
Also, again, even in that situation, I was with someone for 5 years before I felt comfortable talking about them on the internet, right? So it's not like
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, whatever. But at the same time, I recognize these are like I have been in the dating world for the past year, and let me
Mm-hmm.
tell you, it has been very interesting year. Uh,
What's it like dating as an influencer or like a public figure? Like that must be quite hard, right?
Yeah, it is because either you tend to rely on people you know from your past, which is sometimes cool,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes not healthy or ideal, or you have to resort to more exclusive things. Like I was on a dating app that's very exclusive just
Is it
because,
Raya?
yeah, because you can't be on
Okay.
others, or you meet
Mm.
people through friends of friends, or you just
Mm-hmm.
happen to have people you meet, right? And it's been amazing. Actually, I've met some incredible people. I've learned a lot about myself. And every time I have conversations with people about them, about these experiences, there's so much to unpack and so much relatability. So I'm like, okay, it's become this thing where I'm like, okay, this is something that's important to talk about, right? In general,
Mm-hmm.
because navigating these worlds is not easy. But how do I do it in a way that will now feel comfortable? So I think people will see what that's like over the next few months,
Yeah.
and and navigating the while protecting my peace and protecting other people's spaces, but at the same time being like, this is a reality, right? Like it's so strange to go on a date in general, right? Especially
Yeah.
after a long-term relationship. Like, who are you? What is going
Mm.
on? Meeting people, learning about yourself. And, again, for example, men are lauded for playing the field. Women often
Mm-hmm.
aren't, right? But
Yeah.
unless you meet different types of people, I meet a lot of people all the time, but I'm not necessarily meeting people in a romantic context. But over the last year, I
Mm-hmm.
have been meeting a lot of people in a romantic context. And
Mm-hmm.
and it teaches you a lot about what you want, what you don't want. And yeah, I just think it's important to understand that, right? And when people reach out, because I it seems like people feel very comfortable talking to me, the persona, about a lot of things they deal with, and sometimes that can get really heavy.
Yeah.
And we try our best to share resources, but if you see my DMs, people have shared their whole life story about everything, right? And people's biggest things that they care about, no matter what their age, is friendship, is relationships, um, and their own sense of self and identity, right? And they're all often
Mm-hmm.
related. What's my interpersonal identity in this world? Who am I? How do I relate to people? Therefore,
Yeah.
like, what career options? Blah blah blah. But the biggest concern is like, you can be the most successful person in the world, and you have some sort of relationship issue. I don't just mean romantic, with your parent, with your sibling, with whatever. It can
Mm-hmm.
really affect you, right? And so the more we learn how to deal with those types of things, and just like normalize that everyone has these, and not everything is sunshine and roses. Um,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and it's really hard to put yourself out there and be vulnerable to your audience as well,
Yeah.
because you're opening yourself up to people who, like, it's different talking about it to your friends who know you very intimately
Yeah.
versus an audience who knows of you,
Yeah.
right? So, and you can't even try to explain yourself because that makes things worse.
Of course.
So then you just want to just curl up into a ball and be like, I'm not going to say anything. Just leave it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, dude. It's hard. Um,
But
so
but when you put yourself out there, it comes with its good and bad with anything, right?
mhm,
And you
mm,
just, I've learned to live with it. I've learned to be grateful for it because I recognize the impact of conversation and vulnerability is huge. I know the impact it's had on me. Like I remember
mhm,
whenever I've dealt with something, I've seek out music to listen to help explain the thoughts in my head. I seek out people who've gone through different experiences, whether in my personal life or watching people on the internet, because it makes you feel not alone. And so
yeah.
if you feel comfortable putting that version of yourself out there, it'll come with its craziness. But to me, if can make someone feel less alone, that's amazing.
Oh, awesome. Okay, let me go to audience questions for you. The first question is from Shivani from Mumbai. She asks, "What is one food you cannot stand?"
Oh, I cannot stand. I can't eat anything spicy. So anything with mirchi, I cannot eat. So I can't stand
Really?
mirchi.
Like,
Yeah.
does it affect your throat or your
Yeah,
singing
it affects
voice or
my
something?
voice. Yes. But in general, I don't eat anything spicy, oily, deep fried, cold. Um,
All the things I love.
but I cannot do mirchi. Like some places, I will literally say I'm allergic to mirchi because I just
Oh
cannot do it.
no.
So yes, I
Okay.
cannot stand mirchi.
So what do you usually like to eat?
I
I
mean,
know you like to drink a lot of hot water,
I do.
but apart from that,
I love eating. Like I love eating. I love Indian food. I love ghar ka khana. Like homemade food. Um, Sabzis, vegetables. I love vegetables, so all types of vegetables. My comfort food is clear vegetable soup. I know that sounds really boring, but I just love it.
no, but it's yummy.
It's so good,
Clear
right?
vegetable soup is
Thank
yummy. Yeah.
you. Thank you. I
So
feel
do you not eat
clean.
street food, street food and stuff like that?
So, there's this place in Bombay called Elko, which has some street food made from, bottled water. So I'll eat that, and
Mm-hmm.
the guy there understands when I go for pani puri. I'm like, I cannot do spicy. Give me the meetha pani, the sweet water, then I will have it. So I mean, I
Okay.
totally love, like, my favorite chaat is safe puri. I love it, right?
I love safe puri.
Safe
Yeah.
puri is the best. It's not that I don't like these things. It's more that just my body feels best when I eat more like clean, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. Man, you're so disciplined in life. I wish I had like one fourth the kind of discipline you do. That's amazing. Okay, second question is from V.
Mhm.
How does it feel to have a cool granny?
Both my grandmothers were very cool. It's just that the other one
Mm-hmm.
passed away many years ago. So the internet has
Mm-hmm.
not seen her. I honestly think I would like to think that my personality is a combination of both my grandmas,
Uh-huh.
because I think they're incredibly cool and brave and also stubborn, which I know I am. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was really cool to have role models like that growing up, where all my grandparents were doctors, both my grandmas were
Mm-hmm.
educated, very articulate, eloquent, clearly had exposure to a lot of things in this world, and I think that's shaped a lot of who I am. I know that
Mm-hmm.
there's obviously still intergenerational, differences, but I feel
Yeah.
like the intergenerational difference between me and my grandmothers, for example, is much less than for some people and their own parents, and
Yeah.
and that has shaped a lot of my thinking and my way in the world, and I'm really grateful for that.
Oh, nice. We also all love Aji, so we
Yeah.
want to see more of her in your videos. She's so cool, man. She's so incredibly cool.
She's
She's
very
amazing.
chill and bindas, and now she's 90 plus, so she's losing her memory. So she now has no filter. Um, I called her the other day and I was like, "Hey, how are you? What's up?" And she's like, "I'm fine. If somebody comes and attacks me, I can give them one slap." And that's not what I asked, but okay.
Oh, cutie pie. Okay, the third and last audience question. This question is from Priyanka G. She asks, "Who is your celebrity crush?"
You know, this is gonna sound so boring, but I've never had a celebrity crush because I'll tell you
Why,
why. No,
Avanti?
I'll tell you why. I found people attractive, don't get me wrong, but I've
Mm-hmm.
always felt this way about celebrities. And so therefore now feel this way when, us as creators are semi-known, that you don't
Mm-hmm.
actually know the person, right? And through the whole conversation we've
Mm-hmm.
been having, they might seem cool, they might seem attractive, but you don't know them. You don't know what they're actually
Mm-hmm.
like as people. You see a projection of them, right? And
Yeah.
for some people, like, I try my best to have the version of who I am be the version on the internet, but it's never going to be the exact same,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I can't develop a crush on someone if I don't know them properly. That's just me.
Oh my goodness. Okay, okay. Is there a movie or a music video you watched recently and there was someone you were like,
Well,
it's cute.
so growing up, there was this TV show called 90210. I don't know if
Oh
you.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I used
yeah.
to find Liam on that show pretty cute. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, like, I find people cute. Like, I think Shawn Mendes is cute, but
Mm-hmm.
again,
Mm-hmm.
I could never have a crush on Shawn Mendes because he smokes, and smoke is a huge deal breaker for
Oh,
me.
oh. Is it because of your voice or is it more like a morality or slash health thing?
It's my voice first, health second. I used to have a morality thing around it a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think 4 or 5 years ago, I would have this moral high ground about, substances, but I no longer have that. I think for me, it's just
Mm-hmm.
this has always been my personal choice because of my voice. And I think if it weren't because of my voice, it would be because of health.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. All right. We've
Yeah.
come to the end of this Chumma conversation. This is so nice talking to you. Do
Likewise.
you have any upcoming projects you want to share about?
Um, well, when is this coming out?
This is probably coming out in a month or so.
Okay. So, well, I would have just released a new song, so
Ooh.
excited for y'all to see that and hear it.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of updates coming up over the next 6 months, so just stay tuned on all the platforms. Um,
Damn.
yeah, I'm very excited, and hopefully we'll continue to keep building. And thank you so much for having this conversation. I do a lot of these types of conversations and podcasts, and I really appreciate how intentional you were with the questions. It
Uh,
felt like I was just talking to a friend, and
I'm
I
so
had a great
glad.
time.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope to meet you someday in
I
person,
know we've
but
been trying to meet in
yeah.
person for so long, but at least this is one
Hopefully.
step there.
Yeah, one step forward. If you ever come to Singapore, please hit me up. I would love to
Of
meet you.
course, I would love to.
And yeah, have a fantastic day ahead. I'm sure
Thank
it's going to be
you.
very busy, but it's going to be all good.
You as
All
well.
right.
Of course. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.
New episodes of Chuma Conversations with your favorite content creators will be out every Wednesday, so make sure you click on that follow or subscribe button to make sure you never miss an episode when it comes out. Have a great week ahead. Bye.